Good evening, dear TV friend, and welcome to yet another exciting edition of Mountain Echoes here over DMR TV of the Diocese of Boya. Of course, I'm your host, Father Cletus Aka, and today we shall be having an exciting topic of discussion. Today, beginning from 6 a.m. right up to 6 p.m., many radio stations in the world and in Cameroon and Boya respectively, they are talking on this particular topic. And of course, it's a topical topic. And today we're going to learn more about child labor. Of course, World Day Against Child Labor. And with me in the studio are great men of higher quality. And they are experts in this very field. And I'm pleased to have them with me today. Of course, on my right, I have Dr. Armstrong Tamanjong, mental health consultant. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you very much.
Next to him, we have Mr. Abangma Divine, Director of Bosta Institute. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Father.
And by my right, of course, we have I used to call him Coach Emil, while in Bishop Rogan. He's an expert in sport, especially basketball. He's very smart. From the side, he's not smart, but he's a very smart person. We have Mr. Efose Emil. He's a well-being development coach. Welcome.
Thank you, Father.
So, dear TV friend, you are just tuning in. You are on to the program Mountain Echoes over DMR TV of the Diocese of Boya. And today we are talking on the topic World Day Against Child Labor, balancing constructive child engagement and the fight against child labor. Doctor, I'll begin with you. When we talk about child labor, many people will not really understand what it means. So, it's very important that our audience understand the meaning of child labor.
Okay. Thank you very much, dear Father, for hosting us, and to the dear viewers of DMR TV. I equally wish to extend my gratitude to all the children out there and the parents too. In as much as we are talking about child labor, it's good we equally celebrate because they are good aspects of the labor.
That's right.
So, but with respect to that, I think child labor could be defined as exploitation of children. So the key focus there should be exploitation. So we are talking about exploitation of children through work, and which deprives them of their childhood. So if we understand this, it makes it simple. So meaning, in the process of work, the child could instead be enjoying the labor. But if it gets to the point of exploiting that child, it becomes child labor. So I think, to make it simple and not complicated, child labor is that exploitation that deprives these children from their childhood. And that's what starts bringing harm, both physical, mental, social. And it can affect the entire economy and the healthcare educational system. That's what I can say about child labor.
Thank you very much. We talk about labor and work. I remember while studying economics, they would tell us that labor is any human effort directed towards the production of goods and services, be it mental or physical, skilled or unskilled, which earns a reward measured in terms of money or wages or salary. But work, they distinguish that to us that a child who follows the mother to the farm is doing work, not labor, because at the end of the day, you are not going to have a major wage or a payment at the end. But again, there's a kind of payment because at the end of the day, you are going to eat good food, you are going to be celebrated by your parents. And of course, when you look into our society today, Mr. Armstrong, you discover that we are now for the long-term holidays, and it is good that we distinguish between this exploitation of the child and deprivation of the childhood, and of course work at itself. So what are those aspects that if you see a child on the way selling groundnut or any other thing, you'll be able to say that this is child exploitation, this is work that the child is doing in order to support the parents?
Yes, I believe. Thank you very much, Father. I'm very grateful for this honor given to me to be able to express my views on this channel, and Divine Mercy Radio Television is doing a marvelous job so far.
Thank you.
I believe that when you get to the community, normally a child, as defined by the Ministry of Social Affairs, is anyone that is below the age of 18.
Okay.
And such a person is supposed to do work that will be beneficial to his or her own existence, like homework, work at home, and so on, which the child does as a learning process towards his own maturity, so that he imbibes those tendencies or that nature when he grows old. But when work leads to a situation where a child is exploited for economic reasons, that the parents actually forego their own responsibility of fending for the family and imposes this particular work of earning some income on the child, that becomes child labor. And it goes a long way to deprive this child of his potential, because during this holiday, for example, you find children hawking, doing street vending, but you be sure, I will assure you that these children could be put to learn a skill during this period that will be beneficial to themselves and even to the family in the long run. So street hawking and many other forms of child labor, which takes bonded labor. Some children use the children to work money to refund some loan that they have incurred. Some of them work in manufacturing plants and building construction sites. Some do even domestic work in other homes just to fetch money for the family. So the children, the parents and the families expose these children to very serious hazards, which is loss of their potential and their dignity, and this brings about the harmful part of their physical and emotional well-being.
Thank you so very much. We know that, of course, you have quoted the law stipulating that the age of maturity in Cameroon is 18 years and above. I would like to quote the canon law. Canon law is being governed by the Catholic Church, and the canon law stipulates that the age of reasoning for a man is 16 years and above, and for a lady is 18 years and above. And then I don't know, with that of Cameroon, the Penal Code of Cameroon, what is the stipulated age for man and woman? The age of maturity, we consider your age of reasoning. Is it the 18 and above for the both male and female?
Yes,
just male and female.
Okay.
As it has the underlining principle here is anything above 18 years old, we consider that you have really moved to the age of reasoning.
Okay, now when we talk about, I think let us just say something aside this a bit. We'll talk about child abuse sexually. So if somebody is 18 years, if you abuse that child, is it a child abuse? This is underage. See, the age begins from 18 and above.
Yeah.
Oh, that means if you are exactly 18, you are a mature person.
You are already considered to be an adult.
Okay. Doctor?
Okay, thank you very much. Now you're getting into abuse. Abuse is one form of exploitation.
Okay.
And when we are talking about abuse, there are three forms of abuse. We have physical abuse.
Yes.
And in physical abuse, we are looking at some other components. Then we have mental abuse and we have sexual abuse.
Okay.
So now, even an adult, a co-worker can be abused sexually.
Okay.
Even at 50, you can be abused. So abuse is just the violation of your dignity and person beyond your decision.
Okay.
So to make it more practical, like you requested, I think when we're talking about child abuse here, with respect to labor, we are labor, like you said, the reward for labor is a wage or salary.
Yeah.
And if we are talking about child labor, we are talking about a child in the process of income generation.
Okay.
And a practical example, I think the process of children selling granules for their parents could not actually be contextualized as child labor. For example, I did sell puff and other stuff to assist my parents to help me do other stuff too in school. But I happily did that. Now, with respect to child labor, if I was employed by a parent, another person, to sell for them, and now my wage or salary was being tampered with, or I was overworked, that could now be moving into child labor because it is now exploiting me. A perfect example could be children under 18 who are taken as nannies. Because like my closest neighbor said, when somebody is exploited, maybe and deprived of their potentials, because most people who take in younger children as nannies, these younger children come to babysit their children, why similarly their own children almost at the same age, they go to school. Why these other ones stay home? So you are robbing them of their potentials, because this child taking care of your own child has a dream, an ambition, but you want him or her to stay back and take care of your own child, why his or her age mate in your own house is going to school. And in maybe now in the process of the salary payment, maybe treatment and other things, the aspect of child labor can come in there. I think that could be a perfect example where we can learn.
Thank you very much. The other day in class we were studying communication and development, and an example came up like somebody would say that, Father, where are you? I'm in Bamenda. I would say, oh, can you get me a child? Somebody, people just believe that you are from Bamenda, you can get me a child to work in my house.
Yes.
Bamenda people are saying that nanny.
Good care.
Mr. Me, sorry. Today they talked about the learning process. That this hawking or this working of a child can be considered as a learning process. At the same time, it can be considered as exploitation. Could you give us a typical example to explain the fact that, and it is learning process, it's very important that when a child does work in the house or whatever, it's a learning process, but again, the same work can be considered as exploitative.
Yeah, thank you, Father. I enjoyed listening to the panelists. He makes some great education, and in the process, I'm also learning. I also want to add that in the process of learning, I might define learning in 3 phases. The first phase is going to be the formal, as per what is given to us in books. That is what you read and write. It's called formal education. The second phase of learning, I'm going to say, is going to be the informal, which is like when somebody learns directly from another person. For instance, children learning from their parents, somebody in the garage learning directly with apprenticeship, I'll put it that way. And then you have the non-formal, which is whereby people learn through seminars, people learn through educators, people learn through the roads. So I want to put as per the definitions in books, which sometimes some of us are not very comfortable with, to say this particular domain can be referred to as non-formal, in the sense that parents want their children to get a legacy. To some parents, selling these things means making the child start to understand life at a certain level. Yeah. To others, it is like, let this young man walk and see what it means, what we are doing. And to some others, it's a legacy of a parent that would say, when I was young, I carried granite, it paid me a lot. Let my child also do that so that when he grows older, you know. But at one point in time, he's been exploited. In the sense that, for instance, a child is carrying granites, which I might one time say it's like a mother taking a child to the farm, but now exaggerate it by telling the child to hoe 10 beds when he knows at his age he cannot meet up. And like the director defined that childhood is at the age of 18. Yeah. But this notwithstanding, I will define childhood in 3 different forms. I will first take the childhood whereby we take it from, let's say, from 2, 3 to about 12. We take now the second one, the teenagers. That comes now from 12 to a little bit 14. And then now the adolescents, who come now, or we might call them the youths, who come now between the ages of 15, 16 and 17 and 18. And then you define the canon law talking about 16. In different countries, in different laws, in different scenarios, the definition of childhood goes with the particular environment and culture. And I'll come back again to say, in our African domain, most of our children were being taught through the non-informal method, where parents were passing out legacies through demonstration and practice.
Yes.
And that is one of the ways which parents are using in present times to impact their children. And some will even go to an extent of involving the children in situations where the Westerners will appreciate as labor. Because the way a Westerner will define labor is not the same like the Africans will define labor. So all these definition and relative challenges will also be a part of us while defining child labor we should consider. And in considering those various aspects further, we want to come back to say, in our context presently, what we see in the cities as child labor is not the same way in our villages people are considering as child labor.
Yeah.
So that is why I want to come again that it's relatively defined to different areas. But it has come to an extent where some persons have exaggerated the informal learning process to victimize their victims. For instance, you see a small girl of the age of 6, 7 selling granite. That is what I will hold as child labor. That is really, I will even beg that it should be punished. And furthermore, but to an extent, when you give these children from, let's say, 12 and above, because in the process of selling these granules or whatever the case, moving from one place to the other, the children are either gaining wisdom or are being destroyed in one form or the other. And nobody knows relatively what happens to the next child. So that is why I will come to say, Father, we define, after giving these definitions, then now we can start rolling on seeing who is a child, who is a youth, and who is an adolescent. And when we get these 3 definitions, we now contextualize it in relation to the different environment, the traditional domain and the city dwelling domain, and the law in relative to what? The Western civilization.
Thank you very much. We are in Africa, and of course, we Africans, we have our own beliefs and practices. I'll come back to you, Doctor, before I will come to, of course, Mr. Divine. I want us to look at the historical evolution of this particular day. I think it stems from somewhere, maybe from the United Nations organization. I don't know, but it's good that our viewers, this particular day against child labor, the historical evolution of it.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. I think the concept of child labor has been a concern to everybody, because I think even in our African culture, there are sets of values.
Yeah.
And you find out that even when parents usually go to the farm, children are told to stay back and there were particular tasks they will have to do.
Yeah.
So you see differentiation of responsibilities.
Yes.
Were coming. I think with the advent of a lot of changes in our society, culture-wise, a lot of people are picking interest. And some of them have gone advanced to develop policies to guide, to create a standard, which I think institutions like United Nations, they are those proactive team of professionals who want to develop policies. And when you develop policies, it means you want to gain influence. And some of the policies might not actually be good in some other settings. Because in implementation science, you have to look at the content and context of the subject you are dealing with. So, but to put it straight, the topic is broad, and like my panelists have been sharing, there's one concept in education. I think if you find all this, you will start seeing in the history of education, child development, child psychology, you will see some of these things well listed. And so I think the foundation of it comes from education. And then you start looking at other institutions or other subject areas like sociology, anthropology, dealing with culture, human behavior. So, but to make it simple, because we are talking here about something very critical in our society, especially in nation today. Yeah. So I like approaching aspects like this with a concept they give in education known as the person-centered approach. So case study
Yeah.
is more practical than globalization. Globalization could be misleading because it could work perfectly here, and the other way is actually yeah. Yeah. So context wise, I think as a public health specialist and a mental health consultant, mental health is defined as the state of well-being in which every individual can realize his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, and then can work fruitfully and productively, and is able to make a positive contribution to his or her community. So you find out that even though you are a child, there is a contribution you can make in that family. Maybe your contribution is to wash dishes. So if you now don't make that contribution, you find out that when mama has to cook and needs the saucer and is dirty, you are creating an imbalance in that system. So now looking at realizing their potentials and working fruitfully, like Mr. Abangma said rightly, we will only have to settle where the potentials of this person in the process of labor is deprived. Why? Because we have people who had great potentials in some particular fields of life, but you find out that because of the labor that they were involved in their childhood development, upbringing, they lost that potential. For example, Kojemi, you are working with a lot of children, but you find out that this guy has this ability in this, but you find out that later, because of the engagement they have, you can't have access to develop these potentials. For example, my father is one of the examples. He was one of the amazing footballers, but because he had to serve his uncle, to an extent he was deprived from playing football. You understand? So you find out that maybe talent was lost, that potential was lost. So he was serving his father or his uncle, but you now find out that in the process of serving, he lost his potential. That could be considered as a perfect example of child labor.
Okay.
So long as the potentials of an individual has not been fully developed, then we are wasting human capital, because the goal for mental health is human capital development.
Yeah.
And human capital development, we are talking about money. And it is because of child labor that eventually we result into poverty.
That's right.
Crime.
Yeah.
And underdevelopment.
Yeah.
And those are the things that is affecting our economy and societies, particularly maybe on this part of the globe.
Thank you. Now you mentioned something. You're talking about the evolution of this particular day of celebration, and that what came to my mind was these two theories that we were doing media education: the modernization theory and the dependency theory. The modernization theory states that those of the West came to impose on us without asking us, and that is why Dr. Simfred gave us an example where he was in class that some NGO went to Nigeria, one of these Fulani villages, and decided to provide a borehole for them. So the women did not use the borehole; they were still going to the river to carry water, and they didn't find out if they were in need of a borehole. And then, when in the course of investigation, they discovered that the Muslim women don't have chance to discuss as such, so they don't have the opportunity to talk, to socialize as such. So now it is only in the context of going to fetch water that they curse their husband, they discuss their difficulties. So when they provided water nearer to the house, they didn't go there, they saw it, the stream, because it was the only way for them to go and carry it. So when we were just discussing about it, I was just thinking about it. Now we talk about Africa. Julius Nyerere is the first president of Tanzania. Tanganyika at that time was Tanzania. He wrote a book, Ojama, Essay on Socialism. And there he talks about those three forms of education you mentioned: formal, informal, and non-formal. And he says, in collaboration with other social anthropologists, that every culture is a giver and taker. Yeah, we give and take. No culture is superior to another. Now, coming to that, we are talking about child labor. If you see a child on the street, about 12 years old, and the child is selling groundnuts right up to 10 o'clock night, then you arrest the child. Then you go and discover that the parents have nothing to do. They cannot really do anything. Only the child can provide for the family. So what is your take as an expert in this field? What will you do?
Yes, I would say that the topic for this evening is actually child engagement.
Yeah.
and how to balance it with the fight against child labor.
Correct.
And I want to define, first of all, child engagement.
Yeah.
Child engagement is actually the effective participation and involvement of a child in activities and processes that will affect this child's future and effectiveness. Now, we should make it clear where there is work for the child and child engagement, which Dr. Armstrong was trying to elucidate here.
Yeah.
That our parents, I think Ojimil also mentioned it, that our parents had a set of activities that are reserved for the learning process of the children. And when we mistake child engagement for the things that we witnessed today, then there is a problem somewhere. Now, when we are considering these aspects, we are considering it from the point of view, from the perspective of the consequences of this child engagement.
Okay.
For some parents, they feel that this is child engagement. They will not tell you that they are abusing the child. So that is what puts even the social department into a lot of perplexity.
That's good.
Yes, when you get a child talking in the night, and then you do a social inquiry report on the family of the child and the background of the child.
Yeah.
Sometimes, even though we social workers, we are supposed to empathize and not sympathize.
Yes.
You find a social worker tilting towards sympathy than even empathy.
Yeah.
Now, the empathy part of it is what will actually prevail, because as a technician, you are supposed to live according to your trade.
That's right.
Yes. Now I find a child of 12 years in the night, hawking, selling. There was one time I was in a bar sitting with friends, and a small girl of, I'm sure she should not be quite 14, was carrying a huge bag of perfumes in the name of working for some agency that is marketing.
Yes.
I was forced to buy the perfume. It is still in my counter now, in my room. I've not used it. I bought it just to have the opportunity of talking to the little girl. Now, sometimes you need to listen to these children. But the problem is this. It is a prevalent situation. It's a phenomenon that is deeply rooted in our society. The dependency that we witness in our society pushes these families to make sure these children bring in some form of income. Even the crisis that we are going through right now has generated a particular category of social cases where child parents are being manufactured. The crisis has manufactured child parents. So the issue of child labor did not begin even today. It has been a long-standing thing, but the present circumstances has led to a situation where even policymakers have hit their hands on the table that, well, the protocols that exist must be revisited so that child labor should be discouraged at all costs. So, when I find a child on the street, as a social worker, I get the child, talk to him or her. At the level of 12, let's do the categorization as Mr. Mill said here, that there is a child period, 2 to 12, and then the other segment, which is 12 to 14, 14 to 17 or 18. As per the age, we'll be able to do the social inquiry to establish. We are not probably going to arrest the child or punish the child. The best we can do is to call the parents to order. That is what the social department does, because the best area where a child thrives is at the level of the family. That's the best society a child should thrive. And if the family is incapable of nurturing a child to realize his or her full potential, then there is a problem. So the phenomenon of child labor is to be discouraged at all its levels. Be it at the level of family, individual, because the social department, the social affairs department, comes in only when the fabric of society collapses and children, both parents, even adults, and whole societies are reduced to the point of vulnerability. That is where the social department comes in. So before the society gets to that level, when the vulnerability takes from an individual to a family right up to the society, then the departments that are responsible should face their responsibilities. I think this is something that we have to visit. As Dr. Armstrong said, this is a very vast area, domain of discussion. We can go on and on.
Thank you so much. I was very much touched by this, and I wish to ask, of course, we are in a very difficult time due to the socio-political crisis in the southwest and northwest region of Cameroon. Of course, I think I will know before I come to you, Coach Emil. Let me go back to Doctor. What can we do if we see such cases? What does the law say?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm not too quite versed with the law, but I think from the standpoint of human emotions, because I think laws are developed by humans.
Yeah.
Because even the parents, like he analyzed, I think there is a whole gap of ignorance in most of these things we are talking about. Even God tells us that my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge.
Yes.
So
lack of knowledge.
I think the people, some of them are not actually. I've been working with a whole lot of learners this academic year as a consultant in many institutions. So, but one of the things I find out, I discovered, is that from the consultation report, every parent who gets to get the feedback of the assessment has a positive transformation. So I just had to resolve that these people need education. Why? Because you will not understand why an 11-year-old child in Form 1 has attempted suicide twice, has attempted escaping from the house at 11, and not that the parents are not responsible parents. So there's a lot going, there's a lot of pressure even on the kids. The content they watch, it's equally exposing them to this vulnerability that Mr. Abangma mentioned of. So you find out that so some of these parents, they respond as a coping mechanism to the stress that they are receiving too. And in the hospital, we are seeing lots of cases from parents reporting with high blood pressure much more earlier than expected. And this is stress coming from home, from the kids. And so you discover that where are these stresses or risk factors associated with this poor health outcome, economic outcome? Because I can tell you, this whole thing has developed what we call a vicious cycle. So we should be looking at how do we break the vicious cycle to child labor. And that is where we must start looking at scientific strategies. There are definite strategies to solving the problem. So we can't look at the problem because it's big and we are confused. No, we must apply now the principles of prevention. And we know prevention is better than cure. Mr. Abangma, you will come to notice there's something we are looking at. A new category of people in the society called junkies today.
Yeah.
I am amazed that children at primary school, they know people called junkies and they can point them. And I'm wondering what came over these nice guys. And it's associated to child labor to an extent. And now imagine a child is in school, but the parents bought a phone for that child. But this child has engaged in online activities like scamming, and they are doing forex for another person. That is child labor to an extent. But now, is it caused by the parent? It is caused by their peers to an extent. So you see, we can't totally blame it on the parents. The parents are doing quite a lot. But I think, like Mr. Bangma said, as individuals, as government, as organizations, institutions, the church, there's need for collaboration to addressing this problem. Looking at the context of person-centered, you can't talk about it globally.
Yeah.
We must come down to specifics, and I think we will get it there. we would be solving the problem one by one. And they say little drops of water make an ocean.
That's right. Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you so much for that. I remember while we were still in Bishop Rogan, Coach you must have forgotten, but you mentioned something. I remember while we were going to the canteen to buy, there was a child who was going with 10,000 francs. That child was in Form 2. And you mentioned something that your parent gives you such money, such amount of money at this age. It was going to destroy you, because that's what you said, that because when you have money, you look for every means to spend it. And that's why still people scare their friends to go out to go and spend, because they have too much money, they want to go and spend. But if somebody does not have any money, you don't see the person going out to spend. I remember while we were in the major seminary too, when we have money, we are itching to go out and spend. I think it's very important. So right now we shall take a cup of tea, and when we come back, we'll continue with the program. Thank you. Thank you very much. We are right back. Many people are trying to call. Please do not call us. You can send your text message through the number that you have there. Either text message or get to us through WhatsApp with the number that you have on your screen. Please, we do not receive calls here. You can just text us using the number that you have on your screen. Coach Yumi, we are here on this wonderful topic, where against child labor. Of course, you have been dealing with young people, even right at the level of Bishop Rogan. Now you are in the Cube there in Moliko. You are around my compound. I always see you there. Of course, I'm in Cali University. You are there over there. So I always see you working with children. I would just like to ask, has there been any government measure in order to control such happenings in our society today?
Yes, Father, I did youth and actual counseling, which is also part of seeing how to bring the youth to order. And one of the first things is that there is the law of the state that says children should not do work before the age of 18. Father, if a child is supposed to do work, he's supposed to work somewhere, he's supposed to have what called parental authorization. It is a very big tool. And number two, before I even go to that, I want to just give a vivid example. In China, the children at a very tender age are part of production.
Yes.
But they are not part of production as just only work, but as a study to keep legacy.
Yeah. So
now that is where, like Mr. Bangwa was saying, the confrontation comes, or the confusion, how we manage the situation. But this notwithstanding, even the Cameroon government has been making effort through its Minister of Education, who at one point in time was very critical that children should not be selling, that children should be sent to different centers to go and learn. And she insisted that she would not prefer holiday classes, that the children should do hands-on learning. Further, moreover also, there's also this ability of, when we come to doctor, that parents will say, my child has to do this. This is another thing that brings about confusion with the children, whereby sometimes they might go astray. My child has to sell 2 basins of groundnut per day, and then with the pressure, the child is not meeting up everything is not happening, you see the child gets traumatized. Another thing is that I'll come back to what Mr. Bangwa was saying. When we come to this issue of children and sales of good commodity, it is a little bit relative, in the sense that sometimes you might see it as if it's to sustain the family, empathy and sympathy. Let me come back to that point. But further, we are struggling to see that parents are giving opportunities. We can't blame to the parents at one point or the children, because most of our playgrounds have become construction ground for houses. In those days when we were young, we could play anywhere. So there's one other thing again that brings about this pressure of child labor. Children don't have places to play, and parents are becoming saturated keeping a child in the house because the destructive rate is very high. So it is also that. So in this sense, I will pray that another way to help reduce this child labor or forcing children to do activities due to the present dispensations. Some of us have been so curious about it, and we open centers. I opened a center, the youth center, at the nursery school, whereby we are giving the children a plethora of opportunities to learn. They do tailoring, during this holiday. And if at all we had pictures, you will see children at the age of about 2 paddling the machine. I want to hold on this part that the paddling of the machine is not child labor. We in sports want to look it as an ability for child development through their motor abilities. That is why I'll ask that child to paddle the machine, to undo the computer, building his motor sensitive parts, playing the drum and the rest. So you see, sometimes these topics too are so scientific and so social, so cultural, so confusing. But we need to be very outspoken and come out with some criteria that holds. Child labor is when a child is given the task, and especially being forced to carry out an economic activity, and at his own maybe will or not his will. And before I will hand over the microphone, I came again with this concept with the Nigerians. When a parent is having a store, at a very tender age, the child is there to make sure that he masters the store, everything. Then you ask again the question: is that child labor? Wow. In previous years, in the Bakori, people did hunting. When the father was going, he took the son, and was pursuing the animal. The child was doing it so that he takes over his legacy. So at one point in time, Father, though we really understand the concept of child labor, we want to bring all these aspects so that now we'll draw a line. I think when I hand the microphone, Doctor and Mr. Bangwa, we now with their expertise now, we help us to draw those lines, take into the criteria of these different things. But one I want to insist is that during holidays, there are many opportunities. Let's open workshops, let's open centers, because now nearly all our playgrounds have become building and construction sites for people to stay. Children don't have places to play. The energy is multiplying itself. They have to disburse that energy, and unfortunately some parents will feel that they should go and sell, and then they will sell till children come from Tico with snails. They go back at 9 p.m. they are still selling, and they have to go back. And some of these children are exposed to early sexual challenges. Some of them go and taste our new drugs. We're talking about doctor was talking about children junkies. I was privileged to be in one of the schools in Boya in Form 1, and I was asked, I was doing an internship, and I was asked to go to a Form 1 class. And when I went there, the madam gave me an orientation on how she want to teach. But when I went there, I did it my own way. I just came and wrote on the board, today we shall talk about social ills. Somebody should tell me one of the most common social ills that are in your institution. One of them say, coach, marijuana, drugs, and the rest. I said, that's a very tangible point. How do we do? And when we started talking on the topic, that's why we even knew tramadol has sweets. That tramadol is having different colors. As an adult, I learned from those children. And in that way, inside that same class, I was being introduced to a place where people who are already in the system sit, and when we opened the door and looked, they were seated there. And they showed us how the people would leave the compound and go behind the school compound and then keep making they are inside our schools. These children are already, the energies are too much. So sometimes, like doctors say, the parents are suffering from high blood pressure at the present times more than ever, because they are looking for every situation to bail out the children. But the exposure that we have by our children in recent times is 3,000% higher than what we at our own places have. And that is why I'll come back with my final words by saying the challenges of our children are not our challenge. It therefore means we need to come back and see how we can help these children, because their exposures to social ill is higher than where we are.
Thank you so much. Times changes, of course. In those days where we grew up, we're growing up is not the same as we have now today. With this development of knowledge and of course the circumstances, we're in Android society, and so many things are coming up, and that is why many theories are being challenged. Like African philosophers and educationists, they are formal, informal kind of education at that time can be challenged by formal education, and by the amalgamation of the two will go together. And of course, I remember why in the seminar I always quote that, because I school in UB, I graduated in UB, and most of the things I saw in the seminary was not what I saw in UB. In the seminary, we have this particular time from 3 o'clock to 4:30. It's time for sport. You hear that people are dismissed from the seminar if they don't go for sport, because they know the importance of sport. If you play with sport in the seminary, you will be dismissed. They ask you, where are you releasing the energy if you cannot go and do that in the field? Because it reduces stress. And I see the importance from what Coach Mi was saying today. Of course, Mr. Bagma, I was just, let us say something a little about Bosta Institute. I have never been there, but I always see taxi, we enter the taxi, they drop me Bosta Junction, Bosta Junction. And we used to call it Bosta. Is when I see now the spelling here, Bosta. We used to that Bost, B-O-A-S-T. That's how I used to think that's how they call it. So what is it all about, this institution?
It is not Bolster. It is Borstal.
Okay, B-O-R-S-T-A-L. Okay. The one said wrong. Okay.
Yes, I earlier said that the social affairs comes in as a department only when the fabric of the social fabric of the society collapses at the level of individual, family, and even whole communities. Yes, Borstal Institute is just one of those specialized centers that comes to salvage situations which are the consequences of what we are talking about. Child labor, which exposes children, and many other issues that expose children to delinquency. It is a center created since 1973 by decree number 73/115 of the 22nd of March 1973 by presidential decree, involved in the re-education, re-socialization, and socio-economic reinsertion of minors aged between 12 and 17. Males, not of both sexes. It is male children who are delinquents, socially maladjusted children, children in moral danger, and we have added other categories, which serious social cases like abandoned children, street children, and now we have added orphans. This is we find ourselves coming only to salvage. When there is no way to handle the vulnerability, we come now to salvage the situation, training these children, doing behavior modification of the children when it gets so bad. When they go to a level where they commit crimes that are punishable under the law. And when it gets to a situation where they are punishable under the law and they are judged and sentenced to a prison term, since you cannot serve a child between 12, a minor cannot serve a prison term, between 12 and 17, you cannot serve a prison term by the stipulations of Article 80 of our Penal Code.
Okay.
You cannot. So they do referral to a re-education center where behavior modification will be established by a team of social workers and psychologists to change the mindset of the child. But now there is also this fear that if they train the child and change the mindset and re-educate and re-socialize the child, to send him back to the community, there could be a relapse of those tendencies of delinquency. That is why, in addition to the provision of socialization and re-education, we say we will give them socio-economic skills. We train them in welding. We train them in auto mechanics. We have a driving school in that center. We have a government bilingual primary school in that center, and as I speak, we have 9 teachers.
Wow.
With a curriculum specifically adapted to the needs of the children to be able to prepare them for the first school living certificate within 3 years.
Wow.
It's a special program. In there we have a health center for the medical sanitary purposes to take care of the health of the trainees and that of the trainers. So when we do this, the parents of these children who will bring the children into Bostal Institute will now look for means now to re-establish them depending on the skill where the child has specialized in the center. So much so that the government, as it intends, has a 3-fold objective: to rid our streets of insecurity based on this category of children. It can cause a lot of damage. The second is that when these children learn a skill in the center, going back, they may not concentrate on their delinquency, they will concentrate on the new skill they have just learned. So that as they engage into economic activity, government is gaining double, because the general economy of the state will be guaranteed. It is also a way of reducing youth unemployment, because when many of our children come out of even normal formal schools, they get to doing nothing. So this is the objective that the Bostal Institute wants to attain. So we have a resumption of our activities. As you know, the DDR had been planted in the center for about 8 years. So we are coming now just 5 months ago in our administration to try to see how we can revamp the center. So we are now working towards the rehabilitation, the physical rehabilitation of the center first, before we can think of August and September, where we can have our first intake since the coming of the DDR. And I want to say that Bostal Institute has hardly even shut its doors, because while the DDR was there, Bostal Institute was still helping the DDR with re-education and re-socialization of ex-combatants in the center. Now that the ex-combatants are gone, the center is empty now. We can now go through to our mission to train our real target, socially maladjusted, and the ones that we have just named. And we are actually calling on parents that with effect from this week, we are already receiving cases or applications for potential cases that could come into the center to be trained for one thing or the other, but most especially re-education and change of mindset and mobilization towards effective work when they leave the center.
Thank you very much. That was quite deep and educative. This term kept coming up, and I was just delinquency. What does that really mean? I myself, I could not really grasp the
Yes, delinquency is a tendency for, as we say, usually when you think of delinquency, you think of juvenile, which has to do with youths.
Okay.
There are also adult delinquents.
Okay.
Yes, delinquency is actually a situation where an individual poses acts that go a long way to affect his own development and growth, and the development and growth of his environment. So when the environment is ill at ease because of your activities, that is where delinquency is considered. So we believe that delinquent behavior, other people can have it otherwise, but we of social affairs, we establish those little details so that we could come with a clear cut. Because delinquency, as Coach here has said, some of these terms are relative when you look at them in a deeper perspective. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So the center was opened on the 2nd of March 1971. That was
22nd of March.
22nd of March. That was by Amado Ahijo.
Yes.
Because President Paul Biya came in 1982.
Definitely.
Yes. So it shows how long he has served the country and of course the people. And of course, you being the director, you have a mastery of the place. I think our viewers, they have understood the meaning of that place. Many people live in Bukwango, they don't even know what is happening there. Many people just drop me for Bosta Junction. Bosta Junction. One day I asked in the taxi, like, I asked somebody, you're coming there, he said, what is in that place? They said, some house them. So many people are not really aware. Cameroonians, we don't want to read, we don't want to understand. Of course, that is not what we are here for. But I think,
of course.
We are
Thank you very much for throwing some light on my
that is the kind of
institution.
advert. So after this, maybe I may have my package.
It's on its way. It's on its way.
Exactly. Of course. Yeah.
We are moving towards establishing a very profitable partnership with Divine Mercy Radio and Television in the days to come.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
You,
yeah. So, Doctor, we are coming close to the end of this program. Of course, I would really wish that you give your last word to our viewers. It has been a wonderful time having you here, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Like I said, child labor, it's a vast topic, and looking at it, there are different angles at which we can see or we can look at it. And at times it will depend on the person looking because the way he sees could be different from the way a pastor sees.
Yeah.
We can look at some of those maladjusted children at times to be spiritually challenged persons, which could be true.
Yes.
Why? Because man is a spirit, has a soul and lives in a body. So
right.
One of the major concerns. Why? Because there's an exposure to stress. And when we talk of stress, people complain about stress, but there are two types of stress. There is toxic stress and there is healthy stress. And so when we talk of stress that is not good, it's about toxic stress. Toxic stress is stress that has already that is produced as a result of traumatic experiences. So trauma damages an essential part of the human body known as the immune system. And so once the immune system of somebody has been compromised, the person's functionality can never be the same again. Okay. And so that's when you start seeing behavioral disorders, behavioral concerns, productivity concerns, focus, attention deficiency. And this starts bringing, so you find out that a parent actually sent a child, make sure you don't come back after 5. Some of those children you see on the street, they are working under their own influence, not the parents. So the parent, most of the time when they come back, the parent instead shout at them, why did you take long? Why? Because the children, because of the impact of the trauma, maybe from home, they find pleasure more instead outside. So the impact of trauma on the human system creates now what we call neurotoxicity. And this impact now is what now starts producing a constant stress response activation, that you start seeing someone constantly being stressed. Like those children, you say they do drop shipping in school. So you find out that once they are stressed in school, you are in school, you are learning. Why are you stressed? Learning is an enjoyable experience. But they get stressed learning book. They want to drop out of school. So there's something the parents don't understand. And I think it is time parents need to take their children for consultation. So we offer consultation services. Why? Because we come to understand these things. And so once neurotoxicity occurs in someone, you start having elevated levels of cortisols and adrenaline production. These are stress hormones. And these stress hormones now causes that person to start being pleasure seeking. So when they smoke, they get pleasure. When they engage in sexual behavior, they find pleasure. When they take alcohol, they find pleasure. And because of this demand for pleasure, most of them want to get quick source of money to sustain this kind of lifestyle. Right. And eventually, they fall in the gap of hustling. And that's where the child labor concept starts repeating itself. And like he said, parent children. There are a lot of parents who are children in our society today. Right. A 14-year-old girl having a child. And so it creates a vicious circle. You find out that there's a particular family where all the sisters put to bed in the house. and it's a cycle, and they may call it a spiritual problem. It's not actually.
Yeah.
It's about the impact of toxic stress that damages the essential part of man, which is your soul. So I think it's something we need to look at, early screening and detection, because it's a public health problem.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Doctor. Yeah, talking about the division of man, man is divided into the soul and spirit, body. Yes. We Catholic priests, we don't go into exorcism without checking. Okay. I'm sitting here. I have a diploma in both clinical and pastoral counseling. Okay. So when a case is brought before me, I have to do some counseling, ask questions, follow the various steps in order to know before going into casting and binding. Sometimes you are casting and binding things that are not even spiritual. Yeah. So I really wish to commend you on that particular point. Of course, Director, let us have your last word for our viewers.
Yes. Thank you very much. I think talking about child labor comes about when child engagement crosses the line, goes the other side, and becomes so exaggerated, where parents want to lord it too much over their children. Child engagement is supposed to be characterized by effective participation in decision making, involvement in activities, and expression of opinion. Once these aspects are not found or are not enjoyed by the child definitely gets into revolt and starts doing things that go contrary to what a child is supposed to do. And that's what brings about delinquency. As far as child labor is concerned, that is where we say some parents and some society, members of the society, exaggerate the child engagement process. So we like to say that, well, when it gets to a situation of delinquency, as I am, I can always come back to delinquency to say that, well, Bostal Institute is actually in those cases where parents are having high blood and a lot of adrenaline, there's a lot of suffering back home, mental health situations by parents, as highlighted by Dr. Armstrong. Bostal Institute is there to welcome these children so that the parents will have a stress-free parenting, because we'll be having activities too that will be training parents on how to approach delinquency and also how to make the children be even more profitable to them when they grow old. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Look at the evolution of the society. You discover that in those days, Koshimi, it was not like that. All these institutions were not there. The children were growing up, they were fine, and they were learning. I think we are going to have this program again to pick up from here, because we have learned a lot today. We really need to know about this thing, because many people are suffering. They don't even know that they are suffering. And if we meet next time, we are going to have some practical steps whereby we can discover that somebody is suffering from this, and how can we engage into this. What are the practical steps in order to help those people involved? So your last word for our viewers, Coach Mi.
Thank you, Father. I want to thank Dr. and Mr. Abamba for this wonderful exposure.
Yeah.
More that we also almost some of these child laborers, and sometimes not even the children of the persons who own those companies or those things. There are people who were brought in their houses, or their the auntie son, that when the money for the parents are for their children, and the money for that auntie son has to be worked by herself to meet up her own personal targets. And
those are always victims of sexual abuse.
That's right.
So, and another thing again I want to reiterate is that we sometimes at one point, like Mr. Bama, you said, empathy and sympathy. And you cannot hold it at one point, because the economic situation is really disastrous. In the sense that even a taxi driver will not bear with a young man who is going to Lycée with his meager 150. He must pay 200 francs or 250 with the problem of petrol. So you see, sometimes parents are placed on a cord which is so tension that they don't know where to lean, and they just have to do something so that the house runs. Notwithstanding, Father, I think our prayers here have to continue for a situation whereby these activities can be reduced, because there is something I want to say. The gift that God has given to children, if they are properly exploited, Cameroon will never be the same. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Bangma, Divine Director of Bosta Institute. Thank you, Dr. Armstrong Tamanjong, Mental Health Consultant. Of course, thank you very much, Mr. Efose Emil, Wellbeing Developmental Coach. And it's very important. We were to have Dr. Annette. She's a pedagogue, but she could not make it. I think next time she will try to be here. I wish I will get to the program host so that we have this program again, so that we'll try to educate our viewers, the population out there, the importance of this particular knowledge, because it is good that we understand what is happening in the society, how we can better help those who are involved, and how we can identify ourselves if we are truly involved. Some people are mad, they don't know that they are mad. And there's something that we did in the psychology, they call it the Juarez window. And they told us that there are things about you that you know, There are things about you that you don't know, and you think that you know. And there are things about you that you don't know, and people know. So we need all those things around, and it will really help us in order to understand these things. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you for always being there. Thank you for saying yes to us. DMRT is always here to share the light of hope. And we want to thank our anchor and our guest. We want to thank the station manager, Joyce Mbong, and of course the proprietor of this station, Bishop Maibike Miabusubibi. I am Father Cletus Aka. Stay tuned to DMRO TV, and there are better programs coming ahead. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful night.
That was a good one.